you know, that whether or not we like it, there is still a role for the National Assembly to play here. That there is no way we can actually hold that type of conference that we're thinking of having without involving the National Assembly. Do you see a role for them?
Yes, if they want to play a role, very good. They can.
You don't
play a role.
You don't see a real role for them. It's just if they want to.
No, they are Nigerians. For now, they are the de facto government, whether we like it or not. Or rather, they are the de jure government. Both de facto and de jure governments, they are in charge. Now, the role I see them playing is perhaps to facilitate the amendment of a portion of the Constitution that will enable us subject the discussions we have to referendum. If they do that, they would have opened up a way in that Constitution to get, because the basic thing is, was the will of the people captured in the documents there. So if they open up that way to say, the discussions by the national, by the conference shall be subjected to referendum. So whatever you do, once the people...
You want that injected in the Constitution, not as a separate law? Do you think the Constitution can accommodate that?
Yes, certainly all they need to do, because that means the provision to amend that area is far more cumbersome. The Constitution, any part of the Constitution can be amended, including how it's going to be amended. So all they need to do is to work towards amending that portion that provided on how the Constitution can be amended. And within that, they can now say, okay, they commence the amendment of that portion that will say, oh, for there to be a comprehensive amendment of the Constitution, there has to be a constituent assembly who will now do it, and the results of the discussions will be subjected to referendum.
You know, I still don't get this result. That is why I still want to go back, maybe because I'm always having the picture of Somalia in mind, because I am thinking of a situation whereby everything is subjected to a kind of referendum, a kind of vote. Otherwise, it would seem as if it's just the political class that is still talking, making decisions for the people. And if you say everyone will come to the table and talk, it doesn't necessarily mean that the woman right in my tiny village or in a hamlet somewhere can also be part of this discourse. So how do we bring them in if we're not looking at having a referendum of a yes and no on different issues and have people come out to the street and take that vote?
And now you have a document. By the time, if for instance, if you want to do a national conference, people will have to be elected. The woman in your village will participate in the election of the person that will represent him or her for the purposes of the talk shop. The politicians will also have their representations. Every other group will have their own representations. The various interest groups like ASO, and NLC, all of them will be represented in the conference. They will now come. Every segment of the conference, every segment of the Nigerian life will be touched. By the time we finish it, what do? We subject that document not to the National Assembly, because that is where the woman in your village will say, I am not represented, when you subject it to the National Assembly. But if you now have to subject it to that same woman...
Why do you think the woman there will say, I'm not represented, if we subject it to the National Assembly?
The National Assembly was elected to make laws according to the Constitution.
But they're representatives of the people, aren't they?
No, but when you were voting for them, what did you vote for them for? You voted for them to go and make laws in accordance with the Constitution. Perhaps if you knew that you were going to get, that you were electing somebody who will take far-reaching decisions concerning you, you may not have voted Mr. A against Mr. B.
But haven't you also heard that, I think someone said it here, a lawyer said it, that they're also working on the Constitution to the extent that they will have the powers to give Nigerians a new Constitution, not alteration now.
You see, they can work to give Nigerians a new Constitution, but if they work to give Nigerians a new Constitution, can you say that Constitution is coming from the people? The dividing line is really wide, not as easy as people think.
Some people have even said, what if we subject this current Constitution to a referendum? Won't that give it legitimacy?
Of course it will.
That is, if we all agree that there is nothing wrong with this current constitution, aside the fact that the very first few words says, "we the people of Nigeria," and people have said, no, I wasn't consulted. So if that's the only problem with it, then we might as well subject it to a referendum and get it over and done with.
Yes, the answer is yes and no. Why I say the answer is yes and no is somebody gave a constitution, the military gave us a constitution, we now subject it to referendum. When you look at it technically, if we approve it through referendum, it becomes something that comes in from the people. But when you look at the ways the experts on constitution provided it, it is that people should participate in the making of that document. And how would they participate in the making of that document? They would have had people elected for the purposes of discussing what should be the content of that constitution. See, that is why it's not something we should actually wish away, you know, that way. If you come to my community, for instance, there are people I would think we can elect.
You know, I'm still thinking about all of this. Sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Ezeala, I'm looking at, you know, the people, the attitude, you know, the culture and tradition over time. Sometimes we don't really go ahead and follow all of this through and through. And for me, lately, when I talk about issues like this, I still look at Somalia, even though it turns out the way the other part of Somalia didn't want it to go. But that was the real example we could actually bring up, and not any other example when we talk about diverse tribes, diverse culture. In other parts of the world, we've seen how some other countries have actually bought over some other parts of other country and take them as their own. They never had a discussion. They were actually simply paid for and they became part of that other country. So are we saying that this talk is all that we need to make this nation a nation we've always wanted? Because if you ask some, they say it's not about talking. We know the way to go. So Matthew Kuka and so many other people that have been on this program, they said this constitution is enough. Even if it's going to be a 5-page document, it is enough if we can actually respect that constitution.
No, there are things I have already said. I said, one, we may not have necessarily a problem with the constitution the way it is.
Presently.
The constitution the way it is okay. The problem we still have now are operators of the constitution. But that does not take it away from the fact that it is not from the people. That is one thing we must clearly know.
Well, I thought you said the way the constitution is was not given to the people, and so by extension, we assume that you think it won't work.
No. I didn't say it won't work. What I said is, one, the constitution was given to us by the military. It did not come from the people.
But there's nothing wrong with it.
But there is nothing really wrong with the constitution.
So
but the operators are really the problem. Now, when people are talking about the talking will be, how do we get operators of this constitution?
Who are the operators? Isn't it lawyers like yourself?
No. We have the politicians that are the operators. We have the National Assembly. We have the executive that are the operators.
Then we should be talking about how to make the operators, or how to make people respect that document that we have come to say is our constitution. That should be the talk, because if you look at it, I don't think that...
That should be the talk, right?
That should be the talk.
It's still the same talk we're talking about.
Yeah,
we need to talk.
No, it's not. No, we're talking about implementation. It's not an issue that everyone should come to a round table, or an issue for everyone to go into ethnic nationalities to come forward and talk. Because as it is now, we're lucky that we also have them in existence. So some of the examples we bring forth, they don't have such ethnic nationalities in place. So the talk should be about respect for the Constitution as it is.
Yes, respect for the Constitution as it is. And there are some other issues that may be in the Constitution that we should not have. Or there are ways of operating the Constitution, or the ways we're not operating the Constitution we should be able to talk about. Take, for instance, the Nigerian Federation, which should be a secular state, funds pilgrimage. Why should Nigeria as a state? And besides, if, for instance, I belong to traditional religion, are they funding anything in the traditional religion angle? They are not.
Does the law require them to?
The law does not require them either to also fund pilgrimage. But they are funding pilgrimage.
Isn't it lawyers like you that should challenge all of this, since you know what it contains?
There are so many things we're already challenging. And then you also have the issue of the judiciary. How is it working? Which judiciary will you go to? Where you go and file a matter and it stays there for 5 years, 10 years?
Just quickly, would you kindly tell us, I don't know if you've seen the reasons the opposition is given for not wanting to participate in this conference, but if you have, what do you think of them?
Anyway, I think their basic problems, from what I understood from what they are saying are, one, if you say it's going to be subjected to the National Assembly, then you're not serious. You know, I think that is their basic objection.
What do you make of that?
And that is why I still said that we don't need to subject it to the National Assembly. If we want to still make it legal, the National Assembly will only go and amend that section along with the state assemblies that provided for the amendment of the Constitution and bring in the issue of referendum, because as it is now, the Constitution did not provide for a referendum. So the role I see the National Assembly playing now is to amend that section and bring the issue of subjecting the talk shop or the conference to a referendum.
Just quickly again, too, what do you also make of the statement of the Deputy Senate President that this is an invitation to anarchy? I mean, you yourself, you've talked about the melee of people you're looking to invite to this particular conference, the kind of people you're looking to see there. Don't you think that, you know, there'll be too many people, too many cooks who spoil the broth? You don't see that happening as well?
No. You know, we are not talking about, people like us are not advocating for sovereign national conference. We're not talking about sovereign, we are talking about national conference.
That's what I'm saying. Even in the national dialogue list, someone says let's
Yes.
stick with the nomenclature of the president.
Yes.
The kinds of people, the array of people who are looking to bring into it, do you think that we can actually hold any meaningful discussion in that type of arrangement?
Yeah, certainly there will be. If, for instance, we decide to say, INEC, conduct elections for us on those that are going to represent people, and there will be elections is delineated, people will now know, these are people I'm going to elect for this. And they come in. Remember, there is still a sovereign. There is still a government in place. That is why people should not be afraid. There is still a government in place. When you now come to my community, I may decide to still elect a member of the National Assembly. We may still decide to elect a member of the National Assembly if we think he is the person that can actually represent us to talk about the things we want. But again, like many people said, which I agree, people that should go to the National Assembly, people that should go for this conference should not contest any election maybe in the next 10 years.
Really?
And there is a reason for that, yes. Because if they are going to contest election in the next 10 years, it means they will go there to think of how they are going to benefit from the product of what they said. And that is part of the reason why we are saying no government official should be part of the elections, or you decide not to be. Yes, because that's the only way you can decide to say. That's the only way we can decide to say.
Twist.
That's the only way we can decide to say maybe 30% will be for the federal government, 30% for the states, maybe 20%. You know. But when you have people that are already interested, somebody may want to say, oh, we still want 80% with the federal government. And that is very important.
All right, Chukwuemeka is a legal practitioner. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very
Let's
much.
flip over to the headlines. Olumide Macaulay is standing by, and he's going to give us that in about 10 seconds or less. Morning, Olumide.